A man didn't know she was an FBI agent when he attempted to intimidate her at the gym. The room was stunned by what transpired next. The typical mayhem of an after-work throng filled Scottsdale's Prime City Fitness. Sneakers squeaking on the rubberized floor, machines clanged, and music pounded softly in the background. Kenna, a 36-year-old black lady who was focused and confident, was one of the gym patrons. She performed pull-ups, burpees, and deadlifts with precision. She never drew attention to herself, didn't linger, and didn't chat much. It was the same today. Simple black leggings and a tank top were Kenna's go-to gym outfit. She was wearing headphones, a subliminal indication that she wasn't there to engage in small talk. A man came up to her while she was rearranging the weights on the squat rack. Like a thundercloud, his presence loomed unwelcome. He was broad-shouldered, in his early 50s, and obviously made frequent trips to the gym. However, there was a strange quality about him. She instantly straightened her posture at the way he smirked when she saw him. He remarked, "You're using that wrong," in a condescending tone. Kenna removed one earpiece and arched an eyebrow. She said, "Excuse me," calmly. "The weights," he added, making wide motions. "You're not setting them upright. You could hurt yourself." Kenna smiled slightly courteously, but he stayed. "Thanks, but I've got it." Instead, as if claiming ownership of the apparatus, he crossed his arms and positioned himself firmly next to her. He went on to say, "I've been coming here for years. Let me show you the proper form." Kenna firmly stated, "No need," before going to her barbell and reinserting the earpiece. A frown took the place of the man smiling. Under his breath, he murmured something that Kenna could feel in the air but didn't hear. A few individuals in the vicinity looked over, noticing the tension, but nobody stepped in. It was one of those times when individuals tell themselves that they have no business getting involved. Kenna kept working out, her motions smooth and deliberate, but the man remained nearby, observing her with a mixture of annoyance and incredulity. He seemed to find an excuse to follow her every time she changed the exercises, murmuring criticisms that she chose to ignore. Then it took place. When he yelled loud enough for everyone to hear, Kenna moved to the bench press and started adjusting the weights. She stopped in her tracks and turned slowly to face him, her eyes burning, but her visage placid. "Women like you think they know everything, huh?" she asked. "What exactly is that supposed to mean?" The clatter of weights and the murmur of talk seemed to have subsided a bit, and the room became quieter. A few heads turned, interested yet reluctant to intervene. Clearly emboldened by the attention, the man shrugged. "I'm just saying, maybe you should stick to what you're good at." Kenna refused to fall for it. Instead, she quietly went back to her workout after giving him a long, measured glance. The air was now electrified, though, and someone would eventually cross the invisible line that was created in the sand. The man's remarks lingered in the air, bitter and sour, adding to the uneasiness in the room. He was staring at her, and Kenna felt the weight of it. Ignoring the simmering tension, she finished her set and went to the water fountain. Even though it was just a few steps away, she had ample time to consider the circumstances. He was one of the cocky, insecure, and desperate for control males she had seen before. She didn't feel threatened. She had learned how to remain composed under pressure from years of training and discipline. She could still feel the heat of the moment growing, though. The man followed Kenna as she went for her water bottle. His mouth was clenched in outrage as he leaned against the wall with his arms folded. Kenna stopped and tightened her hold on the bottle, but she didn't turn to face him. "Hey, I'm talking to you," she said. Rather, with methodical movements, she took a drink and replaced the cap. "Look," he added, his tone brimming with snobbery. Kenna turned to face him and said, "You don't have to act all tough. If you're struggling, just say so. I can help." Her voice was cold and measured. "Struggling? The only thing I'm struggling with is your inability to leave me alone." A couple of the gym patrons looked over, noticing the change in her voice. Some stopped working out completely, their countenance showing the weight of unanswered questions. Would he retreat? Would she overlook it? There was a shrill, humorless quality to the man's laughter. With a snap, he stepped closer and asked, "You think you're better than me? What makes you so special?" Although Kenna's eyes narrowed, she spoke steadily. That seemed to touch a nerve. "Nothing makes me special, but I know how to handle myself. Do you?" His words fell into a low, menacing tone as his features darkened, and he moved closer. You better watch your mouth. There was now a noticeable tension in the room. Individuals were no longer feigning inattention. As though he was unsure whether to step in, a young man on a treadmill paused, looking first at Kenna and then at the man. Kenna, however, met his gaze and shook her head slightly. Right now, she didn't need someone to step in. Not only was the man furious, but he was also losing his temper, and everyone in the room sensed that the situation was precariously close. The man's fists clenched at his sides as his rage boiled over. He moved closer, now encroaching on Kenna's private area. She didn't recoil. Rather, she stood up straight and fixed her serene, unflinching gaze on his. It was precision control, not disobedience. A whispered declaration that she was not scared. His voice might reverberate off the gym walls as he spat. "You've got a smart mouth, don't you?" The room was tense by now. Unsure whether to intervene, a few gym staff talked to one another behind the counter. Some remained still, trapped in the uncomfortable paralysis of wanting to assist but not knowing how. Kenna inhaled and exhaled slowly. She stated firmly, "You need to calm down," with authority rather than anger in her voice. Although it wasn't a suggestion, her words seemed to pique his interest even more. He extended his arm and roughly grasped her arm. Throughout the gym, there were gasps. At first, Kenna remained motionless, her body unnaturally still as though she was assessing the scene. His hands tightened as he hissed, "What are you going to do about it?" Oh, everything changed at that point. The man didn't even realize what was occurring because Kenna was moving so fast. Her free hand went to her side and firmly grasped his wrist. She moved quickly and fluidly, twisting his arm till he had to let her go. As she moved back, putting herself out of reach but completely within control, he was taken aback by the abrupt change of power, and his face twisted in astonishment and agony. Through the astonished hush of the gym, she began, "Let me make one thing clear," in a calm, pointed voice. "You don't put your hands on me, ever." The man staggered back, gripping his wrist, his confidence clearly eroding. However, he roared in frustration and lunged at her, rather than backing off. Kenna didn't hold back this time. Using his momentum against him, she easily avoided his awkward attack. She swept his legs out from under him in one fluid motion, causing him to fall loudly to the mat. Chaos broke out in the gym. While some yelled, others hurried to clear the area, and several took out their phones to record the action. As Kenna stood over him, her posture firm and unflinching, the man moaned, stunned and ashamed. She whispered, "You really don't know when to quit," so that only he could hear. He briefly appeared to think about trying again, but the expression in her eyes stopped him in his tracks. She was not only self-assured, but also deadly and well-trained. The dread in his eyes spoke louder than words, but the revelation came too late. However, the damage had already been done, and the entire gym had now watched his aggressive behavior, as well as his embarrassing loss to someone he had misjudged. Now the gym was alive with the click of recording phones and the quiet murmur of whispers. Standing straight and breathing steadily, Kenna looked around the room with a calm yet authoritative demeanor, as though she was daring anybody else to cross the boundary. Still sprawled on the mat, the man stumbled to his feet, uncertainty, guilt, and rage mingling in his face. Like an animal in a corner, he yelled, "You're crazy!" and pointed at her. "You think you can just—" "Enough!" Kenna interrupted, her voice cutting like a razor through his words. "You've embarrassed yourself enough for one day. Leave." Finally, a young woman with wide eyes and shaking hands, a gym employee, came forward. The man's jaw tensed, and for a split second, it appeared as though he may fight back. "Sir," she continued in a trembling voice, "you need to go now." However, it appeared as though the weight of the looks from everyone around him, some disapproving, some angry, sank in. He mumbled something incomprehensible and backed away, his shoulders slumping. He stormed out, pushing the glass door open so forcefully that it rattled, and snatched his luggage off a nearby bench. The room appeared to release a collective breath as the door shut behind him. One person clapped, then another, and until the audience erupted in a little cheer. Kenna signaled for silence with a raised hand. "It's over," was all she said. The group started to thin down, with some going back to their exercises and others continuing to whisper and look in her direction. With his phone still in hand, A young man warily walked toward her. He said, "That was incredible," in an awe-filled voice. While her gaze remained serious, Kenna smiled slightly and asked, "Are you like some kind of martial artist or something?" She answered, "Something like that," without providing further details. A middle-aged woman who was also a gym-goer came forward. "Are you okay? That was terrifying to watch." Kenna said, "I'm fine," in a stern but composed tone. "Thank you for asking." The young woman behind the counter reappeared, trembling as she wrung her hands. "You did what you could," Kenna interrupted, her face softening. "Ma'am, I'm so sorry. I should have stepped in sooner. I just didn't know." The employee agreed while maintaining an uncomfortable expression. Not everyone knows how to handle situations like that. After giving it some thought, Kenna said, "We should call the police, though. He might come back." "No need," she finally said. There was no room for question in her voice as she said, "He's not coming back. Trust me." She turned and went to get her belongings in the locker room. However, when she left, the whispers persisted, and the gravity of the situation hung in the air, forcing everyone to think for themselves. With deliberate and controlled steps, Kenna entered the changing room. She noticed a composed, serene face smiling back at her in the mirror as she grabbed for her exercise bag. There was no sign of gloating, no triumph in her face. Making a statement that respect is mandatory was the goal here, not to prove anything to anyone. Silently allowing the adrenaline to subside, she packed her belongings. The young woman from the front desk warily walked in as she was zipping up her suitcase. Kara was written on her name tag. She hovered close to the doorway, tinkering with her shirt hem. Then Kara said, "Can I ask you something?" Kenna looked back steadily but kindly. Kara paused before blurting, "Sure." "How did you stay so calm? I mean, he was so aggressive, and you just handled it like—" "How?" she asked. Kenna folded her arms and rested on the bench. Her words, "It's not about staying calm." Kara cocked her head in curiosity and said, "It's about knowing you can handle yourself. Fear loses its grip when you're prepared." Kenna nodded slightly and asked, "So you're trained like military or something?" "I served as an FBI for over a decade. I faced worse situations than what happened out there." Kara's gaze expanded. Kenna said, "Wow, that explains a lot. But it's not just about training," in a serious tone. As if taking in Kenna's comments, Kara nodded slowly. "It's about knowing when to act and when to let things go. He wasn't just angry, he was insecure. People like that look for easy targets. When you show them you're not one, they don't know what to do." "I wish I could be that brave." "You can," Kenna said me plainly. "Bravery isn't about not being scared. It's about standing firm when it matters." The middle-aged woman who had previously checked on Kenna peeked in through the locker room door as Kara took in the advice. Softly, "Sorry to interrupt," she said. "I just wanted to say thank you. You handled that with so much grace. Honestly, it made me think about how often I let people walk all over me." Kenna smiled faintly. The woman nodded thoughtfully, saying, "Standing up for yourself isn't always easy, but it's necessary, not just for you, but for everyone watching." "You're right. I think I needed to see that." Slung over her shoulder, Kenna carried her luggage. We all need reminders sometimes. Kenna had a sense of quiet resolve as she left the locker area and into the refreshing evening air. Perhaps it was meant to be, but none of this had been part of her plan. Perhaps someone in that gym needed to witness what strength looked like. Not strength in terms of physical prowess, but strength in terms of poise, fortitude, and a refusal to allow ignorance to triumph. She knew the narrative wasn't about her, though, even as she made her way to her car. It was about everyone leaving that gym with a fresh outlook, a lesson ingrained in their thoughts about bravery, respect, and the perils of assuming too much about someone. Even though the gym gradually filled up that night, the incident was still vivid in everyone's memories. There were discussions among the regulars, with some repeating what they had witnessed and others reflecting on their own responses. Why had they been hesitant? How may they have handled it differently? Something more profound than shock had been triggered by the encounter. It had made individuals reevaluate their presumptions and their silence. After her shift, Kara, still shaken but motivated, sat at the counter and browsed through her phone. The footage of Kenna's composed yet firm movements had already started making the rounds on the internet. Admiration, incredulity, and even some self-reflection were among the many comments that poured in. The incident wasn't only about what had happened, it was also about what it revealed. She handled it like a pro. This is what strength looks like. Why did no one step in sooner? People undervalued others far too frequently, whether out of ignorance, bias, or conceit. Kenna had become a symbol of silent strength by skillfully and gracefully shattering such illusions. At home, Kenna was drinking tea while her dog snuggled up at her feet. Messages from gym patrons congratulating her on her bravery, asking for help, or expressing gratitude buzzed through her phone. Although she didn't consider herself a hero, she was grateful for the sentiment. Regardless of the size of the stage, she believed that standing steady in the face of injustice was more important than the spotlight. She was as modest as ever when she went to the gym the next week. People now welcomed her in a different way, showing their respect by nodding and smiling. Kara timidly walked up to her and held her a card. With a, "Just wanted to say thanks," she said. Later at home, Kenna opened the card and said, "You've inspired me. You reminded me that strength comes in many forms. Thank you for showing me what it means to truly stand tall," was the straightforward statement inside. Kara wasn't the only one who gained knowledge that day. Respect must be earned and is not bestowed easily, as everyone who saw the altercation or simply heard about it learned. Strength is about guts and determination, not about size or bluster. It's the silent act of remaining strong when everyone else expects you to give up. However, the man had completely vanished from the gym. No one knew if he did it out of fear or shame, but his actions had a lasting effect that was not what he had planned. But it was a clear reminder of what happens when ignorance and resiliency collide. One idea sprang out at Kenna as she thought back on the incident. Perhaps the world didn't need more heroes, but rather more individuals who were prepared to stand up and demand the respect they were due. Tell someone who needs to be reminded of the value of courage, strength, and respect if this story touched you. Remember to subscribe for more thought-provoking, inspiring, and challenging stories that will stick with you long after the credits have rolled.